I mean, you know, obviously in the right hands they're fantastic animals, in the wrong hands they can be a bit of a nightmare, but beautiful breed, like German Shepherds.
Yeah. Is there a breed that's, aside from Labradors, after all those years working on tugs, that is close to your heart?
Well, the Labrador is what I consider a real dog. I mean, it's a good solid. They're a presence. Yeah. We had two of them, for goodness sake. We went to pick up the wee puppies in Taupo and came back with two for two daughters, basically. We've got a son as well, but the daughters were very persuasive. Anyway, so we ended up with these two brothers who were together. They were never apart in nearly 15 years. And so, you know, that 15 years, it's a huge portion of your life, you know, to think that those guys were there when the children were young and as they grew, and they were just a part of the family for all that period. So when they go, you know, as I earlier mentioned, it's sort of, you can't help but be affected by that. Yes. But, you know, I agree with Anna as well. There is the other side of it, that we no longer have that huge commitment when we go away, having to worry about where to put the dog.
Both yours and Mark's, Jim's commentaries were hilarious. You had a brilliant flair for getting inside the dogs' heads.
That was Jim's forte, honestly. He was a genius. He used to write it all out, longhand.
That's
the pauses.
Jim Mora. Still doing it on Sunday morning, Mark.
He was extraordinary.
That's the panel. Have a good show tonight on Nights.
Thanks,
Ben, Thomas, Anna Dean, thank you. And a big thank you to my producer, Sally Ward. I'll see you at 3:45 on Monday. Lisa Owen next with Checkpoint.
Te whakarongo mai koe ki te reo irarangi o Aotearoa. This Checkpoint on RNZ National. I'm Lisa Owen. Haere Akine, police believe 3 whanau members were home when baby Rue suffered fatal injuries. So 5 days on, why hasn't anyone been charged? In the US, a manhunt continues for a mass killer as more information about the victims emerge. Among them a father, a new worker, members of the deaf community and a Hall of Famer. UN shelters for displaced Palestinians in Gaza are almost at 3 times their capacity. Back home, if you're hoping for a great Waikaremoana walk this summer, you could be in for a great disappointment. Will any brew do, or are you strictly barista only? Supermarket instant coffee is put to the test. And by all accounts, there is a rugby game this weekend. Quelle surprise. RNZ News at 5 o'clock. Ahia Marie, good afternoon. I'm Evie Ashton. The head of a group working to prevent child abuse is calling on the next government to make child safety and protection a top priority. A post-mortem has showed Lower Hutt toddler, Rue Ahipeni Wall, died from blunt force trauma 5 days ago, and the case is now being treated as homicide. Jane Searle of Child Matters says there have been enough reviews and recommendations and reports, such as the one on Malachi Subex, a 5-year-old murdered by his caregiver in 2021. She says if those recommendations were implemented, it would help reduce the number of child abuse deaths. Meanwhile, the death of Rue Wall, who would have turned 2 on Wednesday, has shocked Lower Hutt locals, including Avalon resident Karen Jones.
I feel for the child. What a way to be treated by people that you expect you could trust. And that's it. It's such a betrayal to that child. And the child deserves better. And it's a shame it wasn't picked up on sooner.
The police investigation is centred on 3 people living in the house with the toddler, but no one has yet been charged. And you can hear more about this on Checkpoint shortly. Pharmac's chief executive has apologised for making unprofessional comments about a journalist and stories of cancer patients struggling to self-fund essential medication. Sarah Fitt made the comments in a series of internal emails last year, which have been released under the Official Information Act. In a statement, she says her comments were not in keeping with public service values and she deeply regrets them. Pharmac's board has today accepted 8 proposed actions for improving the agency's culture. Gun control in the US is again in the spotlight as the hunt continues for the man who shot dead 18 people in the state of Maine. Army reservist Robert Card is wanted for the murders in the city of Lewiston. The BBC's John Sudworth is there.
The police continue to scour vast swathes of countryside in search of a suspect who is armed and dangerous and very much still at large. There have been attempts here to enact meaningful gun control, but most have ended in failure, and it is a failure that now looms large over this tragedy, with questions being asked about whether, had the authorities had more power, they may have been able to act on what seem to have been clear warning signs.
A student-led organisation aimed at preventing sexual violence is calling for the introduction of a universal process for reporting sexual assault. Information released under the Official Information Act shows that more than 330 sexual violence incidents have been reported to the country's universities over the past 5 years. Kate Shelikin from Thursdays in Black says there are inconsistencies when it comes to dealing with complaints.
It did create situations where someone who had caused harm in one hall was able to just go to a different hall.
Kate Shelikin says the figures show tertiary institutions also need compulsory consent education for students. Sport Canterbury says it's gobsmacked by the cost blowouts for the city's floundering sports complex project, now estimated at $700 million. The project's building contractor, CPB, tried to terminate the contract with the government's delivery agency, but was overruled in the High Court earlier this week. Justice Venning ruled in favour of Crown entity Raupainga, which had sought orders restraining CPB contractors. Sport Canterbury's chief executive, Julian Falloon, says the situation is farcical.
It's just beyond belief that a project that was sort of just over $200 million has now grown to increase threefold in terms of variations that not only financially hugely concerning, but also causing constant delays to a piece of infrastructure the city is just crying out for.
In sports news, England have accused World Rugby of denying Tom Curry a fair hearing over his allegation of an on-field racial slur by South Africa's Bongi Mbonambi. Curry claims he was abused during last weekend's World Cup semi-final loss to the Springboks. However, World Rugby found insufficient evidence to back the allegation and cleared the South African hooker to play in Sunday's final against the All Blacks. England say they're deeply disappointed by that, with coach Steve Borthwick saying the victim hasn't been heard. Both Curry and Mbonambi have been subjected to social media abuse, and Springboks captain Siya Kolisi says he's spoken to Curry.
We can take it as players. When it comes to us directly, it's fine. But when it comes to your family, it's totally different. It's really hard when the family is involved. It's the one part of the game that we really don't enjoy. I feel for him and I feel for his family.
Meanwhile, the All Blacks have made just one change from their semi-final starting lineup, with Brodie Retallick coming in at lock and Sam Whitelock dropping to the bench. The Springboks have made two changes, bringing in veterans Faf de Klerk and Handré Pollard at halfback and first five. In football, Liverpool have thrashed Toulouse 5-1 in their Europa Cup group stage match at Anfield, while Brighton claimed their first win, beating Dutch club Ajax 2-0. And Rotorua will again host the opening event of the Mountain Bike World Tour in March. That's the news.
Tomorrow morning, when there's perfectly good water in the tap, why are so many people buying plastic bottles of it? Daniel Jaffe's been looking into it. Robin Davidson's trek across the Australian desert became a book and a movie and made her famous. Why did she do it? And what happened next? And why some sounds make some people mad. Misophonia, it's called. Call Kim Hillaho. Join me tomorrow morning from 8 on RNZ National.
You're on Checkpoint next with Lisa Owen. Right now, the short forecast from Met Service to midnight Saturday. Northland, Auckland, Coromandel Peninsula. A few showers clearing this afternoon, then mainly fine. Isolated showers for a time in eastern Coromandel and Northland tomorrow, turning to rain in the far north from the evening. For Waikato, Waitomo, Taumarunui, Taupo and Bay of Plenty. Fine weather. Taranaki and from Taihape to Wellington, also waded upper. A few showers clearing over most places this evening or tonight, and then fine weather. Gisborne and Hawke's Bay, mainly fine weather. Isolated showers north of Wairoa for a time tomorrow morning. Westland and Nelson, isolated showers, clearing this afternoon, then fine. Bulla, Marlborough and Canterbury. Scattered showers with snow to 400 metres, clearing from Canterbury this afternoon and elsewhere in the evening, then fine. Otago, Southland and Fiordland, showers, possibly heavy with hail, with snow to 200 to 300 metres easing this evening. Showers retreating to Southland and Fiordland coast tomorrow morning, then clearing later, and Chatham Islands, showers. The time is 7 minutes past 5. I'll have traffic news and headlines for you at 20 past 5.
Nā mihi Evie, tēnā koutou katoa, nau mai, haere mai, ki checkpoint I tēnei rā, ko Lisa Owen tēnei. The latest on the investigation into the death of toddler Rue Ahipeni Wall, amid revelations a person living in the house where he died was facing multiple violence charges. We'll have that shortly, but we begin tonight with a developing story in the United States, where a gunman remains at large more than 24 hours after the country's deadliest mass shooting this year. 18 people were gunned down at a bar and a bowling alley in the town of Lewiston, Maine yesterday. More than a dozen others were injured. The manhunt continues for 40-year-old suspect Robert Card, a petroleum specialist and former Army reservist. As we go to air tonight, police are outside Card's home. We'll have more on this from World Watch's Phil Vine, who'll be live in the studio shortly. But first, this from CNN's Mike Valerio.
It was hard enough to listen to Leroy Walker's pain Thursday as he waited for news of his son, a bar manager at work the night before when a man began shooting.
When you get anything that happens like this, you go empty.
But on top of that pain, where Lewiston's local hospital received 14 patients in 45 minutes, where a middle school turned into a reunification center where not everyone was reunited.
Lewiston is a fairly small city, and to think that this is in our own backyard it's just very hard to comprehend.
Police say the suspect, 40-year-old Robert Card, faces an arrest warrant on multiple murder charges. Law enforcement officials say he's a military-trained arms instructor who had been committed to a mental health facility for 2 weeks over the summer. Thursday, many area schools and businesses closed as the manhunt expanded.
This is a dark day for Maine.
We're learning the names of the victims. 53-year-old Tricia Aslan was trying to call for help at the bowling alley when she was killed, her brother said. 40-year-old Brian McFarland was participating in a cornhole tournament at the Bar and Grill, according to his sister. And Leroy Walker discovered his son, Joseph, had died. Police told the family that Joseph used a butcher knife trying to stop the gunman.
Trying to save some more lives that he ended up losing his life.
Phil Vine from World Watch has been closely following developments in Maine from our foreign desk, and he joins me now. OK, Phil, so we know the police have surrounded Robert Card's last known address, and what's been happening there?
Well, kia ora, Lisa. From what we understand, the FBI went twice to this address earlier in the day, and then they went in fast, and media reported some explosions, which could have been the sort of flashbangs that they use to police use sometimes in siege situations. They came back about 1 o'clock New Zealand time. That's early evening in Maine, and they surrounded the house. They used loudspeakers to say, "Come out with your hands up," the full deal, and everyone was expecting some kind of confrontation. But they went in, no one was there, so Card's not at his house. What they did find was a suicide note addressed to his son in the house.
And any other information or clues to where he actually could be?
Well, he left a white Subaru sedan at a boat ramp not too far away from Lewiston and not too far from his home. And the authorities are working on a couple of theories. Either he did a switch and bait and had another car there and left in that, or he's taken to his boat. Now, there's a big river system there, and now the Coast Guard have joined the federal police, the local police, the county police, trying to find him. Helicopters and drones will go up at first light. The Atlantic Ocean isn't that far away. He could be anywhere, really. So the net's kind of widening rather than tightening, Lisa.
And today we're learning a bit more about his past and his career in the army and his personal life. What do we know now?
So Robert Card is an army reservist. That means like he was in the territorials. He's a sergeant, first class, and joined in 2002. Reports have been coming in all day about his recent past in his personal life. He's said to have just lost his job, which could have been a possible trigger, and he broke up with his long-term partner. And there are some reports that she used to frequent the bar and grill, which was one of the crime scenes, of course, where 18 people were killed. He's also reported to have spent the start of the year in a mental health facility that's in the Maine summer. And there's some strange reports that he bought a set of powerful hearing devices to put in his ears to see what people were saying about him. So that gives you some kind of idea of the tenor of his mental health.
And so, in the meantime, while the police continue to search for him, what is happening with the local people? Are they still in lockdown?
Well, yeah, they're going into a second night of what they call sheltering in place. They can't go outside. That's about 100,000 people in 2 counties. And that includes the friends and the relatives of those killed and injured. So they're unable to get together and console each other. It must be a really terrible time. And this gunman is still on the loose. And at this point, he could be anywhere.
Thanks for the update, Phil. That is Phil Vine from World Watch. 3 whanau members were home when Lower Hutt toddler Ru Ahipeni Wall suffered fatal injuries, and one person living in the house was facing multiple violence charges. But 5 days since his death, police have yet to charge anyone. The death of Ru, who died just 2 days before his second birthday, is being treated as a homicide after a post-mortem showed he died from blunt force trauma. Somya Barmidi-Pati reports.
As police continue to piece together the circumstances that led to baby Ru's death, locals on the streets of Lower Hutt are devastated by the news. Karen Jones says she's deeply saddened.
I feel for the child. What a way to be treated by people that you expect you could trust. And that's it. It's such a betrayal to that child. And the child deserves better. And it's a shame it wasn't picked up on sooner.
She says family violence is a big problem all over New Zealand.
I think it just depends on the stress of the household and the financial side of the household. If they're under a lot of stress, and a lot of it sometimes because of money, things like that tend to come out. The worst in people come out, and it's sad.
Another local, Jesse Rewaka, agrees, but says family violence seems to be increasing, particularly in Lower Hutt. She says more support is needed for people who ask for help to leave abusive family situations.
They just tell you what to do and not actually be there for you to get to where you need to be. And then they just end up staying there, and then, not just the children but the mothers as well get very scared to leave, and the longer that you stay, the harder that it is to leave. And when you have children, it's even more hard.
The police investigation is centred on 3 people living in the house with baby Ru, including one who was a blood relative and 2 members of the wider whanau. At a media conference yesterday, Detective Inspector Nick Pritchard said the child had suffered extensive injuries.
This level of violence toward a child is difficult to fathom, and we will work hard to ensure a thorough investigation is carried out to determine exactly what happened.
Meanwhile, other government agencies remain tight-lipped over the death. Oranga Tamariki won't say whether it was involved with the whanau, and the Corrections Department isn't commenting on reports that a person living in the house was facing multiple violence charges. Local councillor Naomi Shaw, who was born and raised in Taita, says the close-knit community is hurting.
We're devastated to hear the tragic loss of a baby in such circumstances. Anybody in the Taita community will be really, really reeling from this.
Reporting child abuse to authorities is not currently required by New Zealand law. Jane Searle, the boss of advocacy group Child Matters, says it could make a difference, but only if it's part of wider reforms. She says there's enough funding put towards ending abuse, but says it's not being well spent.
Many strategies rolled out, many plans rolled out from a government level, a nice launch, and then nothing actually filters to the front line. So that's where the money needs to go. And we need to be very clear about what we're trying to achieve at the front line. And as I said, these things have been identified in numerous reports. So it's nothing new. We just need to get on and do it.
Jane Searle wants the incoming government to treat child abuse cases like this as a policy priority.
Soumya Babedi reporting there, and we'll have more on this and the powers of police and investigations like this after 6. It is 17 minutes after 5. Kia amo tunu mai. Do stay with us. You're listening to Checkpoint on RNZ National. The All Blacks are carrying a weight of expectation from their fans and are on the brink of making history at the Rugby World Cup. On Sunday morning, they could become the first country to win 4 World Cup titles. Standing in their way is South Africa, who are also chasing the same history-making 4th title. For coach Ian Foster, it would be the ultimate redemption story after almost losing his job a year ago after a number of losses. Although the final might be 19,000 kilometres away at a raucous Stade de France, many fans back home are very much planning to get behind the men in black. Reporter Tom Taylor and camera operator Nick Monroe have more.
And the All Blacks are headed to the big dance, the World Cup final.
At 7:55 on Sunday morning, some Kiwis will just be rolling out of bed and dragging themselves onto the couch as the national anthem blares from the TV speakers. But not Mario. He'll be watching from the gym.
I'm doing competitive indoor rowing. So I don't want to miss the training, but at the same time I don't want to miss the rugby. So,
while he's one of the more active viewers, he's not alone in getting revved up for the game.
I'll be watching it. I'll be watching it for sure. First one to 4 cups. We've got to get it. I got a big bet on with someone at work too, South African, so it's going to be interesting.
Okay, yeah, how much is on the line?
$100.
With a lot at stake, even those leaving the country are prepared to lose some extra hours sleep.
We're over in Aussie, so getting up early and watching it with the family.
Moira has her own special plans for Sunday morning, visiting her husband at Selwyn Retirement Village.
It's quite funny, some of them are asleep though, and then they wake up when we get a try or the other team or, it's lovely to see them interested in watching.
For those who don't yet have their viewing party sorted, the hallowed turf of Eden Park is opening its gates to all. Commercial manager Duncan Blomfield says it's about as close as fans can get to the final without being there in person.
There's probably nothing better than being in Paris right now, the Rugby World Cup. So the next best place will be Eden Park, Paris at the Park. We're going to have some performers. We're going to have obviously the Rugby World Cup on the super screen. We're going to have some different French-inspired food and just a really nice family-friendly atmosphere for everyone to come and enjoy.
He's expecting up to 25,000 spectators to lay their picnic rugs out on the very field where the All Blacks raised the Webb Ellis Cup 12 years ago. But Mr Blomfield doesn't want to jinx their chances this time round.
I don't want to get ahead of ourselves, but in any case it's going to be a magical environment, great experience to be part of, and of course if everything goes to plan it'll just be the best place in New Zealand to be part of.
Pubs are also making the most of their extended trading hours. Just a short walk from Eden Park, the Bridgeman is opening up bright and early to greet fans with full pints and brimming cocktails. Owner Chloe Taylor's hoping to build on the buzz created by the All Blacks Argentina semi-final.
This weekend, the Sunday, we are completely booked out. We've got about 130 to 150 booked already, and we're trying to keep some space for walk-ins as well.
It'll be all hands on deck, with Chloe bringing in extra staff to help out.
So we have a projector screen in our function space, so we're setting that one up for the game. And then I'm also bringing my TV from home, getting that one put up on the wall so that we've got an extra one. So everywhere you sit in here, you can see a screen.
As the All Blacks head into their final preparations, these spectators have some final words of support.
Come on All Blacks, you can do it. Hit them hard and play like the Welsh.
Go the ABs, smash them.
You darlings, just go for it. You go because you're the best.
The big game kicks off at 8 a.m. Sunday, New Zealand time.
It's 21 after 5 and you're at Checkpoint on RNZ National. Homai o whakaaro, we would love your feedback on anything you've heard on the program this evening. Evie will be all over that All Blacks game. We'll probably have, a match wrap from her on Monday. But let us know if you're watching, what you're planning to do on the morning. 2101 on text, tweet us at checkpointrnz, or you can email us, checkpoint@rnz.co.nz with your reckons. It is time for the headlines now. Anea Evie, mena pita pita kōrero.
Police in the US state of Maine are surrounding the house of a former army reservist who's suspected of killing 18 people and wounding dozens more in yesterday's mass shooting in the city of Lewiston. Reports say 40-year-old Robert Card recently lost his job and had broken up with his long-term partner and has had mental health issues. A group working to prevent child abuse is urging the incoming national-led government to make the issue a top priority. Child Matters is making the plea as a homicide inquiry continues into the death of Lower Hutt toddler Ruthless Empire Ahipeni Wall on Sunday. The police investigation centres on 3 people living in the house with the boy. More than 330 incidents of sexual violence have been reported to the country's universities over the past 5 years, according to data released under the Official Information Act. A student-led organisation aimed at preventing sexual violence, Thursdays in Black, says tertiary institutions need to teach consent. The cost of Canterbury's sports complex has risen to $700 million. Construction on Parakiore began back in 2018 and the latest completion date is now June 2025. And Pharmac's chief executive says she deeply regrets making unprofessional comments in emails about a journalist and stories of cancer patients struggling to pay for medication. Sarah Fitt's emails have been released under the Official Information Act. Those are the headlines. Looking at traffic on State Highway 2 in the North Island, the Tauranga Eastern Link has been blocked by a crash westbound approaching Sandhurst Drive, but that has now been fully cleared. You'll need to allow extra time for congestion to ease. Our next traffic news and headlines are at 20 to 6.
Ngā mihi, Evie. Let's go to Paris now, where we're joined by our rugby reporter, Joe Porter. Hi, Joe. What are the crucial matchups in this side to play the Springboks?
Bonjour. Yes, well, you have to think at first 5. Richie Mo'unga versus the very experienced Handré Pollard for the Springboks. Handré Pollard only coming into this tournament late after being injured early on, and he was crucial in that win over England in the semi-finals for South Africa, kicking that long-range penalty that gave them the victory by just 1 point. So those 2 players will be crucial to their chances, and of course it really comes down to the forward packs and the set piece. The All Blacks will need to get parity at least at scrum time and during the line-out, and the breakdown will be critical as well. Loose forwards Sam Cane, Ardie Savia have been playing extremely well, as has Shannon Frizzell, but we all know the Boks are big, physical, and they've basically got 2 forward packs with their whole bench essentially being forwards. So the All Blacks are going to have to play almost 2 Springboks forward packs during this game, because they call themselves the bomb squad, the South African reserves, and they'll be coming on no doubt just after half time to really try and grind these All Blacks forwards down. So those are probably the most crucial matchups you'd imagine.
It is the final game for a lot of these players, and one veteran has played his last game for the All Blacks.
Yeah, very sad, of course, for Dane Coles. He's been a great All Black over many, many years. He's a fan favourite and a media favourite because he's one of the most honest and open and effusive when it comes to these press conferences, which can be fairly stale and dour at certain times. So it would have been, Coach Ian Foster said it was one of the hardest conversations he's ever had as a coach when speaking to Dane Coles earlier this week and letting him know that he wouldn't be playing in this World Cup final and he'd played his last match for the All Blacks. So you do have to feel a little bit of sympathy for Dane Coles that he won't be running out there, but no doubt he's a real team man. He's been doing all he can to help this team prepare this week, and he'll just be hoping the team can get the job done and he gets another World Cup winners medal to hang in the man cave when he gets home.
You've said the team seems relaxed, maybe more relaxed than some fans. What do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it comes down to a few things, no more important than the fact that a lot of pundits didn't see the All Blacks reaching this World Cup final. A lot of them didn't see them getting past Ireland in the quarterfinals. So there's an element of pressure lifted off this All Blacks team. They're playing their best rugby they have in a number of years. They seem to be confident in themselves and the systems they're using. They've, of course, had 2 very strong performances behind them with beating Ireland in that thrilling quarterfinal and a big win over Argentina in the semi-finals. So, yeah, there is an element of confidence. They seem relaxed, and Coach Ian Foster was probably the most relaxed I've ever seen him at yesterday's press conference. They seem at peace with themselves, and of course they've got a chance to make history, as you've mentioned, in this World Cup final.
You feeling relaxed, Joe?
I'm feeling relaxed. I do think the All Blacks will win this one. It seems that they've come through a lot of adversity and they've really hit their straps at the right time. They have had a pretty good build-up. There's been no major injuries in the squad. The Springboks, by compare, have had a very, very tough pool games. They've had tough quarterfinals, tough semi-finals. They look a bit tired. And, of course, they've had the distraction of the issue around their hooker Bongi and Wanami this week and him potentially being ruled out of this game if that World Rugby investigation had gone other ways. So I think the All Blacks possibly feel confident for good reason.
And a win would obviously be the ultimate redemption story for Ian Foster. What has he said about his future?
Yeah, really interesting, isn't it? Only 15 or so months ago, he was one loss away from losing his job, and now he's one win away from being, probably given a knighthood and being considered one of the greatest redemption arcs in all of All Black coaching history. So he was very coy yesterday when asked about what he might be doing after this World Cup. He sort of made the joke that he was focused on heading home to mow his lawns, but he did actually in the end confess that he would be coaching again next year. Where that is remains to be seen. There's been some speculation he could take on the Wallabies job, with Eddie Jones set to confirm his exit from there and very shortly. But the most likely scenario is that he heads to Japan and takes up a coaching role over there, as many New Zealanders have done in the past, and he's got a fair few connections over there, including Sir Steve Hansen, his former boss.
Hey, Joe, before you go, what's that over your left shoulder all lit up beautifully there?
Yeah, it's lovely, isn't it? That's the Eiffel Tower. They don't always light it up every day or every night, but they've got the big, the shining headlight spotlight on it, and it's lit up beautifully. I wonder if the All Blacks win, it will be lit up black and white, or if the Boks win green and gold this weekend. Who knows? But it certainly is a very pretty sight, the Eiffel Tower in the background, isn't it?
Maybe they did it just for you in your live cross to New Zealand. Thank you so much, Joe. That is our rugby reporter, Joe Porter, live from Paris there with the Eiffel Tower just behind him. Okay, are you a coffee snob? Only a barrister brew will do. Well, this next story could stir things up and maybe save you a few bucks too. Consumer New Zealand has done blind taste tests of 9 supermarket-bought instant coffees. 10 people were asked to prepare each quick brew as they would normally do. So if they had milk and sugar, normally chuck it in too. Then they scored the taste out of 10 and completed a short survey on the aroma and strength too. Can't wait to hear. Consumer investigative writer Rory O'Shea joins us now with the results. Hi, Rory.
Hi, how are you doing?
I'm very well. We believe in full disclosure here at Checkpoint. So are you into a barista brew, or are you okay with an instant one?
I think I'm probably the chief coffee snob at Consumer New Zealand. I've got a machine at home. I try and avoid instant coffee if I can help it, but you never know when you're going to have to dip in. It's always good to have some at home. So,
okay.
Yeah.
Well, let's start with the results then. Are the cheapest instant coffees the nastiest in terms of taste, according to this taste test?
Well, we got some interesting results. So it did kind of track that as a rule, the cheapest coffees perform most poorly. But there was an exception, which was Pam's Cafe Roast. Now, Pam's Cafe Roast was the second cheapest coffee that we taste tested, but it was the third highest scoring coffee when it came to taste, and it was pretty marginal. So if you're looking to save your pennies in the cost of living crisis, Pam's Cafe Roast gives you kind of around in and amongst the best taste, but for a much lower price point.
Can you remember the price? Do you have the price, Rory, of the Pam's?
I can tell you that it was $3.19 per 100 grams. Yeah.
Because even the instant stuff is not cheap, is it, these days?
No, it's not. It's not that cheap, and there is quite a range. So we looked at the prices per 100 grams of a few of the coffees, and we tried to test the most value options. Then we tested kind of a coffee from all of the major brands, and we tasted coffee from Supreme. Now, Supreme's coffee is kind of doled into single servings. Clearly a lot has gone into the design of the product and packaging it up into single servings. But that came in at $76 per 100 grams. So it's a significant jump in price. Yeah.
I'm interested in some of the comments your taste testers made.
Yes.
Yeah. Talk us through a few of them, Rory.
Well, among the more positive comments were that the coffees had recognisable coffee flavours, right? So obviously we're sat there. We've got 10 people tasting 9 different instant coffees. They're all tasting them blind. And if you are a coffee snob, and clearly our Wellington office is full of them, they weren't best pleased with a lot of the coffees. So we had Robert Harris, Nescafe Gold and Pam's Cafe all had quite fairly positive comments. Someone picks out the texture of the Pam's coffee and saying that it feels like a high quality coffee. There's a citrusy taste note in there. But kind of the further down we go, and we realise that coffee taste is not something to take for granted.
Which one tasted or smelt like muddy football boots, please? Because that was one of the comments, wasn't it, Rory?
Well, it's one of the ironies of taste and smell and the different individuals involved is that Pam's was the one that smelled like muddy football boots. It's I would call it the pound for pound champ of our test, but clearly one of our taste testers didn't like the smell.
And burnt potato skins, not in a good way, was one of the other comments.
Yeah, let me just try. I don't have them all to mind. That was Jed's number 2, which came in 5th place. So yeah, that's Jed's medium offer. Yeah, that was supposed to taste like burnt potato skin.
Rory, the price of a takeaway coffee made by a barista is, it's up there these days. Can you tell us anything about how much it's increased recently?
I don't know how much it's increased recently. I know that, and I'm not too familiar with. I think the standard has been about $5. Is that right? That was my understanding. I don't know how much it's increased, and I think that with the price of milk rising, of beans rising, that kind of thing, it is likely to have gone up in the last couple of years.
Our listeners will be able to tell us that. 21001 on text. They can give us some feedback on that. Hey, the next step, I reckon, Rory, is to check whether your people in a blind test can tell the difference between a barista coffee and one of these instants. I'd love to know how they go with that.
Well, I think that instant coffee is maybe quite far away from developing the perfect flat white that you can add boiling water to. But it might be all right with a long black.
Exactly.
I think the takeaway is that the margins are so small with all of these coffees from best to worst. They're very small. The price differences are actually quite drastic. And I just think that if people are looking to have a decent cup of instant coffee ready for when guests come around, that you can find really good value if you look for it.
Thank you, Rory. Appreciate your time. That is consumer investigative writer Rory O'Shea there on instant coffee. I'd love to hear your reckons on that one. 2101 on text. Tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ. Are you a fan? Which ones? Does price determine taste? 27 minutes away from 6. Kia mau tunu mai. Do stay with us. You're listening to Checkpoint on RNZ National. Time for the business news now. Ko taku hoa e nai ko Nona Peltier. Nona, you a fan of the old instant coffee? No, the face says it all. All right.
Not really, no.
Let's move on.
But I'll drink it.
Let's move on to consumer confidence. It's improving, but still pessimistic. Okay, what's the latest?
Yeah, so it's a little bit better than it's been. More people are a bit more optimistic about the way things are going. And one of the things, though, is that only 38% think it's a good time to buy a major appliance. That's kind of interesting because the other day we were talking about the number of people taking out personal loans to buying higher priced goods. And so, I think there's some mixed signals out there, and it remains to be seen. And we'll have to just keep watching this to see what happens as we head through the last quarter of this year. And as we get closer to Christmas, there's going to be lots of sales coming up. Maybe people are just waiting for a better deal.
Okay, Fletcher Buildings Board was peppered with questions at this morning's annual meeting. Was this about Aussiegate or something else?
It was about something else.
Okay.
It was mostly about the share price. So a lot of things affect the share price, including the pipe problem in Western Australia, but also the ongoing saga with the completion of the International Convention Centre in Auckland. That's the one that was was subject to that terrible fire back in 2019. Today is the 8th anniversary of the day they broke sod there. They just went there for the little ceremony. They're all excited. In those days, they thought it would take 35 months to complete on a budget of $700 million. Well, I'd be surprised if it wasn't like twice that price. And now it's 8 years. And they're hoping to build it completely by the end of next year. What's interesting about that is that the car parks, about 1,300 of them, are finally been handed back to Sky City. Now they can use them.
Flooded when they hosed the fire out.
Yeah, really. Flooded, damaged very badly. Took, all this time to fix them. Interestingly, the insurance payout to repair the building hasn't covered the cost. Today, the chair of Fletcher told the shareholders that the steel needed to be, a lot of it had to be replaced at a much higher cost than it originally cost, an additional $250 million. Wow. So,
not chump change. Okay.
Not at all. But you know what? The market seemed to perk up a little bit with that. The share price finished up 0.25%. Now, remembering this is $4.36. Back in the day, before the problems arose, back in 2017, $10 plus. So, it's a long way down. Anyhow, never mind that. The local top 50 index is also a long way down, a drop of 0.75%, 82 points down to 10,767. New Zealand dollar, it's a little bit mixed, 58.2 US cents, 91.8 Australian, 47.97, so just under 48 pence. But here's the interesting thing. We're going to have some inflation data overnight, and next week we're going to have some additional information from the U.S. Federal Reserve, along with some other really cool economic data that might change the picture altogether.
Thank you, Nona. Ka kite. Nona Peltier there with Business News. The chances of hiking the Lake Waikaremoana Great Walk this summer, well, it's not great, with the track likely to stay closed until at least mid-January next year. It's been shut for more than a year, with Tūhoe claiming Crown under-resourcing has made the lake track unsafe. Te Uru Taumatua Tua, or TU2, which looks after Te Urewera for Tūhoe, is also locked in a court battle over dock huts. It started pulling down what it says are derelict structures, promising to replace them with better facilities. And that prompted a bit of a row with some hunters and trampers. Then in November last year, a court ordered an immediate halt to their destruction until the case can be fully considered. Ko taku manuhiri Anaine, called Tamati Kruger. Tamati is the chair of TUT and joins us now. Kia ora, Tamati.
Kia ora, Lisa. How are you?
I'm very well, thanks. Hey, I'm just wondering, are you committed to opening this track back up to the public and keeping it as a great walk?
We are, and unfortunately we can't do that until around about mid-January.
What's the hold-up?
Well, our claim, I think, and supported by the Waikaremoana boaties and the Mayor of Wairoa, is that Genesis, with using a failed water management practice, really is responsible for most of the damage and destruction around the Great Walk.
So, what are you saying? Just to be clear, Tamati, are you saying that they held the dam with too much water in, and when there were these extreme weather events, it had downward effects on your land?
Yes. So after Cyclone Hale, everybody could see Cyclone Gabriel coming, and Genesis decided to hold the water there over and above really their consents. And this caused soil undermining, erosion, vegetation decomposition when they finally let the water out. But in doing so, they collected a premium for the sale of the electricity.
Okay, because Genesis Energy absolutely denies that claim and denies it had anything to do with the higher lake levels at Waikaremoana. But it does say that it extended financial support, right, to help with the remediation of the track, but it was rejected. Why did you reject an offer of assistance then, if you think they're responsible?
Genesis offer of 200,000 is what they make in a day and a half, Lisa, from their dams at Waikaremoana. They registered a profit of over $550 million. That's an insult, 200,000. What we want to talk with Genesis about is really their failed water management practice, and to get a commitment from them never again to hold back water of that magnitude. And it was just really a lavish display of entitlement on their behalf.
So, as well as that, Tamati, would you accept money from them? What would not be an insulting offer?
No, we will first accept them sitting down with us to talk about their water management practice. That's the most important, because that's the thing that has caused the damage and the destruction. After hail, Tūhoe and Doc spent a lot of money getting the Great Walk back to a degree where people could use it, Manuhiri could use it. And then Gabriel came along, and then there was a repeat of that whole destruction. It's not good that over 10,000 visitors, they come to Te Urewera per year, now are inconvenienced and bearing really the costs. These are trampers, boaties, hunters, and as well as Tūhoe people that are bearing the cost for that. Genesis, Lisa, is uncommitted and uninvolved in a relationship with Tūhoe and Te Urewera.
Are you going to continue to fight to remove the huts?
Oh, we're on another subject.
Yep.
Okay.
Related, because obviously trampers and people using the area, well, they like to stay in a hut. Do you still want to get rid of the ones that are there?
We are not getting rid of any huts around the Great Walk, Lisa. You're talking about huts elsewhere in Te Urewera.
Yep. You're still going to go ahead and get rid of those ones?
Well, there are huts.
So the answer is yes?
Yes.
Going to take it through the court?
They need renewal. They're from 1950.
So on the walk itself, you have said realistically not until mid-January. How confident are you that you will meet that target to get the Great Walk open again?
We're very confident that we can.
Really appreciate your time, Tamati. That is Tamati Kruger, who's from Te Uru Taumatua. It's responsible for looking after Te Urewera for Tūhoe. Now, Genesis Energy denies claims it had anything to do with the higher lake levels at Waikaremoana, saying it was due to successive weather events. It says data shows the average inflow to the lake over the 12 months to June was almost twice the long-term average and the highest since records began in 1930. Genesis says it tried to engage constructively with Te Uru Taumatua and DOC and offered financial support to help it get it open for later this year. It says while the offer was initially rejected, it still stands. It is 17 minutes away from 6 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Homai o whakaaro, we would love your feedback on anything you've heard on the program this evening. You can text us 2101, tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ, and the email address is checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. Let's go to the headlines. Ko iwi anō tēnei.
The Christchurch Terror inquest has heard that police and St John communications staff physically ran messages to each other on the day of the attack as it was more efficient than using their computer systems. Constable Dara Taylor said St John and the police use different systems, and this had caused frustration even before that day in March 2019. Police say 4 teens aged 13 and 14 who were in Wellington's Two Myths building before it burned down on Sunday will be referred to youth services. One teen has also been referred for setting light to items which subsequently caused the vacant Gusney Street site to catch fire. Meanwhile, firefighters will remain at the scene of a Dunedin house fire overnight while it remains unclear if anyone was in the building when the fire started this morning. The blaze broke out before 7 a.m. and spread to 2 neighbouring houses before it was contained, while their occupants were safely evacuated. The Chinese embassy in New Zealand has paid tribute to former Premier Li Keqiang, who has died of a heart attack aged 68. He was the second most powerful member of the ruling Chinese Communist Party, and the embassy says he made a significant contribution to the relationship between New Zealand and China. And hundreds of people in costume are taking to Central Nelson for the Mask Carnival, which got underway a short time ago. The event, part of the Nelson Arts Festival, is the first for 4 years because of COVID restrictions. Those are the headlines. Looking at traffic, crashes on State Highway 2 on the Tauranga Eastern Link and on State Highway 1 in Northland at Wellsford have been cleared, so traffic should be moving as usual in those areas. Our next news and weather is at 6 o'clock.
Ngā mihi, Evie. Temporary shelters for displaced Palestinians in Gaza are heaving at almost 3 times their intended capacity, according to the UN Refugee Service there. It says it's now housing more than 625,000 people forced from their homes due to the hostilities in 150 facilities. In its latest situation report, the UN Relief and Works Agency for Palestinian Refugees says current stocks of fuel are almost completely exhausted, forcing a halt to life-saving services, and dozens of its own staff have been killed in Israeli strikes on the Palestinian territory. Joining us now is Hector Sharp, a New Zealand humanitarian lawyer who is working with UNRWA in Gaza. Kia ora, Hector.
Good morning, Lisa. How are you?
Hello. Can you tell us, please, a little bit about the conditions that the displaced people are living in, the ones that are sheltering at UN facilities?
Sure. The conditions inside the shelters are dire. I've been visiting some of them over the last week or so, and there's a lack of clean wash water. There's a limited amount of drinking water. There's a limited amount of food. It's very crowded conditions. You have entire, multiple families, up to 70, 80 people into one classroom, which was previously for, 20 students. And you have people overflowing into every city.
Hector, I'm just losing you a little bit on the line, but we'll try to continue on. I know that a number of your people have been killed.
Can you hear me clearly?
Yeah, I can hear you now, Hector. I understand that a number of your own people, your own staff, have been killed in missile strikes. Can you tell us about that?
I can, yes.
Can you hear me, Hector?
Oh, mate, I haven't had breakfast yet, but we're cooking some eggs here.
Hector, can you hear me? I think we've lost Hector. Are you there? Okay, we'll try and get Hector back a little later in the program. It was Hector Sharp we were trying to speak to there. Communication is pretty difficult into Gaza. He's a humanitarian lawyer who is working with UNRWA, and they help refugees in Gaza. Hopefully we'll be able to get him back at some point. The police dispatcher on the day of the Christchurch Terror attack says she would have sent armed units to Linwood Islamic Centre if she had been aware of the threat contained within the gunman's manifesto. A police call taker was told of the threat 8 minutes before the terrorists began shooting, but the inquest heard today the dispatcher allocating police officers didn't learn of the information until days after the attack. Timothy Brown was in court.
Then police dispatcher Constable Dara Taylor never saw the threat against the Linwood Islamic Centre contained within the terrorist manifesto on March the 15th, 2019. 4 nights after the massacre, Ms Taylor went back over every job that came into the communications centre during the attack.
It was when I went through the events in the time order they came in, rather than the priority, that I found the call from Parliamentary Services with the event type National Security, NatSec, that came in at 44 hours to the call taker.
During that call, a parliamentary staffer told the call taker there was a firearms threat against multiple mosques, including Linwood Islamic Centre. It was given a priority 2 classification, and as a result, Ms Taylor did not see the information.
I was focused second by second on priority 1 events that were popping up on my screen in fast succession in relation to firearms offences at locations around Christchurch.
That information was received at 1:45 p.m. 44 people already lay dead or dying at Al Noor Mosque. The gunman began shooting at the Linwood Islamic Centre at 1:53. Ms Taylor says if she had become aware of the potential danger at Linwood, she would have sent armed police.
I would, again this is with hindsight, send someone there straight away to evacuate everyone in that mosque and then clear and have AOS there for if he showed up there. So I would not have just 2 officers standing outside just in case. It would be an evacuation.
Instead, police officers arrived just minutes after the gunman left. 7 people were murdered at Linwood Islamic Centre. Dara Taylor describes the shift as the most chaotic of her sworn or non-sworn policing career. She says St John and the police use different systems for recording and prioritising calls, and, as a result, it's more efficient to physically run messages between the two agencies in the communications centre, rather than sending them digitally.
In terms of what information gets relayed between the two, I'd be lying if I said that it hadn't been a problem before.
Are you aware of any steps that have been taken to remedy that problem?
Other than constant frustration by frontline staff and dispatchers. But that would be my one takeaway from this, that ambulance get funding from the government to update their system so that they're all the same.
One of the lawyers for some victims' families, Laura Carter, asked Ms Taylor about her training for such situations.
I realise at this time you're dealing with the situation at Deans Ave, you've got this situation at Linwood, you've got reports from the hospital, and you've got reports from the arresting team that you're managing all at the same time. They're all giving you information. Had you had any training designed to help you manage a large multi-location event like this one?
No.
The inquest also heard from another communications centre staff member on the day who was mentoring 2 new call takers, one of whom took the call from Parliament about the terrorists' manifesto. The witness, who has name suppression, became emotional as she recalled learning about the active shooter on the day.
I do not recall who told me about this or how I found out. However, I made sure they did not answer any further calls due to their minimal experience and just starting out in the job.
She says the junior call taker alerted her to the unusual call and she listened in as a result. She also flagged the call with her supervisor and got the Parliament staffer to forward the manifesto to the supervisor. The inquest continues next week.
It is 8 minutes away from 6. Kia amo tonu mai. Do stay with us. You're listening to Checkpoint on RNZ National. For the first time, the brakes are going on vehicles at a popular West Auckland beach this Guy Fawkes. Auckland Council's extended a ban on motorbikes and cars driving along Muriwai to cover the days when fireworks can be sold, so from the 2nd to the 6th of November, because of the fire risk and potential damage to the beach's ecosystem. Muriwai Beach will also be closed again to drivers over the peak summer weeks for safety reasons. Auckland Council's Regional Parks Principal Specialist, Stephen Bowell, says Guy Fawkes is a particular worry.
There has always been and a significant concern about the risk of fire to not only the dune system at Muriwai, but the Tūnioni Rangatira Muriwai Beach, but also the Woodhill Forest, which is on the leeward side, or the side the wind blows toward from those dunes. So we've had a couple of instances of fire there, and we have an awful lot of illegal fires in that space, and there's a grave concern that that one of those fires is going to get out of control one day.
Tell us about the wildlife or the ecosystem that's there that could be in danger if that were to happen.
Well, Muriwai is a particularly sort of special place, and for everybody who drives on the beach, I'm sure they'll agree completely. But the dune system itself is home to the Muriwai gecko, which is only found in that space. There's regionally threatened plant species, particularly Caprosmera cerosa, which is also found in the back dune systems of Muriwai. And we have struggling populations of tohiroa, which have been, they're a prohibited take species, and there are some populations, but there's a common belief that they're heavily impacted by vehicles. Not only that, but we also have coastal birds, seals that pop up on the beach from time to time to rest, penguins that nest in the dunes and the rocky areas to the south of Muriwai. And all of those are significantly impacted by the behaviour of some drivers and vehicles in general on the beach.
What about people safety? You know, a lot of people use that beach. People ride their horses. There's a lot of dog walkers.
Yeah, look, and that has been a concern for many, many years. And we have, unfortunately, and condolences to the families who have been impacted, but we have had fatalities on that beach in the past. We've had a number of very serious incidents involving vehicles scaring horses. We've had vehicles run over dogs. We've had vehicles run over seals. We've had families who are trying to enjoy a picnic fearing for the safety of their kids because of the speed and manner of driving of some people driving vehicles on that beach.
So this is not just for Guy Fawkes, right? So over peak summer, also, there will be a ban on driving on the beach. And that all vehicles, motorbikes, quad bikes, cars, everything?
Well, yes. If you look at the rules, basically driving a vehicle on the beach is prohibited in the Auckland region, with the exception of by permit at Muriwai and Kariatahi. Now, to have a permit, you need to be registered and warranted and have a driver's licence. So motocross bikes, quad bikes, unless they are road registered and road legal, are not authorised to be on either beach. The summer closure is closure from about the 29th of December through to the 15th of January. That's a repetition of a closure that's been in place for the last 3 years to take the pressure off the beach during a higher use period.
How are you going to police this?
Well, the closures, we have gates. We barrier those gates. We also have staff who work on the ground, 7 days a week. For Guy Fawkes, we will have security patrols present. And we do rely on the beach users in general. So, for closures, no vehicles on the beach, that would seem relatively straightforward. There will always be those who try to push that line. When the beach is open to vehicle access, we do rely and we actually ask people to have a look at what's going on around them. And if they see driver behaviour which is dangerous, reckless or causing concern to others, to ring star 555 111 if it's an emergency and actually report it at the time. So, if police can do something about it, they will. If they can't, at least we have the information so we can build a much stronger picture of what's going on up.
What are the potential penalties, Stephen, if you disobey the rules?
Breach of the Local Government Act carries a maximum fine on conviction of up to $20,000. Police obviously have all the Transport Regulations and Summary Offences Act and Criminal Offences Crimes Act that they police. That is in their shop. So they have, depending on what the issue is, be it potentially arson from a fire perspective, somebody unlawfully, lighting a stolen vehicle, which we have had in the back turns in the past, that carries its own criminal penalties.
And that's Stephen Bell from Auckland Council there. Let's get to some of your feedback. There is a bit of it on instant coffee. First, in the positives, someone's sent us this message, all in capitals, so it's pretty important. Raglan Roast makes a freeze-dried instant coffee like astronaut food, amazingly good. That's from a self-described coffee snob. Someone else says, Cal O'Lure, we can blame Invercargill man David Strang for inventing instant coffee in 1890, this listener says. Yes, I just read that today, did not know. Puke, they go on to say. That is from a long-term Devonport listener. I think you're being a little unfair. Adam has got in touch to say, Lisa, ! Wake up, ! All instant coffee is garbage. Yuck. No. Adam, you clearly have not had an instant coffee at the Checkpoint office. You get yourself a manky old Checkpoint mug, few chips out of it, no worries. There's a giant coffee tin, like the one your grandmother used to have, and you need a spoon to lever the lid off. Couple of scoops of instant AEV.
Don't look at me.
And then the big treat, the trick, Adam, is that there's also a corresponding Milo tin, and you stick a scoop of that in there, mix it together, and you've practically got a mocha, top shelf stuff.
Tastes like grass after it's been through the cow.
It's a top shelf drink. I recommend it. Someone else says it seems a lot harder for anyone to make a decent long black.
RNZ News at 6 o'clock. Paul Mardier, good evening. I'm Evie Ashton. A police dispatcher on the day of the Christchurch Terror attacks has told an inquest she was only focused on events assigned the highest priority that day. A police call taker was told at 1:45pm on March the 15th, 2019, that the terrorists' manifesto contained a threat against Linwood Islamic Centre. The massacre there began 8 minutes later. The call taker assigned the information a Priority 2 classification. Constable Dara Taylor, working as a dispatcher at the time, says she only saw the information 4 days later.
I was focused second by second on Priority 1 events that were popping up on my screen in fast succession in relation to firearms offences at locations around Christchurch.
Dara Taylor says she would have sent armed police had she been aware of the threat. European Union leaders have called for pauses in fighting in Gaza and the establishment of humanitarian corridors to enable aid to get in. After hours of talks, however, they fell short of calling for a ceasefire, as demanded by some countries. The BBC's Sofia Betitza reports.
In their joint declaration, EU leaders expressed their gravest concern for the people of Gaza and said unhindered humanitarian access to reach them was vital. Pauses in the fighting would be needed to make that happen, the statement said. All 27 leaders condemned Hamas and said its use of civilians as human shields was particularly deplorable. The compromise reached in the text backs Israel's right to defend itself in line with international law. But the EU's own foreign policy chief says Israel's blockade of Gaza has already crossed the line.
UNICEF Pacific says the trauma and impact of Cyclone Lola in Vanuatu will be taking a toll on children. When the cyclone hit this week, schools on Pentecost Island hadn't yet recovered from twin cyclones in March, nor from Cyclone Harold in 2020. UNICEF Pacific Child Protection Officer Rebecca Olu says it's devastating for children and their families as cyclones become the new normal.
Children who are 6 years old have experienced 3 to 4 cyclones that are of a Category 4 to a Category 5 in their lifetime. So you can imagine the kind of trauma, waking up in the morning and seeing damage to the house that you were sleeping in just the day before.
Images have emerged of schools collapsed with roofs blown off and classrooms flooded and torn apart by fallen trees. In a major coup for the police and customs, $63 million worth of drugs has been seized and 4 men have been charged. The 140 kilograms of cocaine was found concealed at ports of Auckland yesterday in a container that originated in Ecuador. Detective Inspector Tom Golan says a drone used by the group for surveillance was seized, along with equipment for recovering the drugs from the container. He says the discovery of a pistol with a silencer attached was particularly chilling. The 4 men have appeared in court charged with importing cocaine, firearm offences and participating in an organised crime group. An Auckland councillor says the council has failed to think about future generations in voting against the introduction of Māori wards. There will be no Māori seats on the council at the 2025 local body elections because of yesterday's 11-9 vote. Kieran Leone, who voted in favour of the motion, says the result is a loss for the whole city.
We know that Māori, especially our young Māori that are coming through, have got great ideas around our environment, around keeping safe, all of these great things that have to come from Māori to solve the issues for Māori.
Some councillors said the independent Māori Statutory Board already brings Māori voices to the table. But a member of the Henderson Massey Local Board, Will Flavel, says 30 other councils have already recognised the need for Māori representation.
It's really important that Māori can see themselves in public office when it comes to decision making, to ensure that there is that strength of Māori decision making at these levels of governance.
Will Flavel says the council will need to take another look in the future. The underground car park attached to the fire-damaged International Convention Centre in Auckland has finally been repaired and handed back to Sky City. A massive fire in late 2019 almost destroyed the centre, which was in the final stages of construction. 4 years on, Fletcher Building is still working on completing the structure. Fletcher Chair Bruce Hassel says the fire damage exceeded insurance cover.
What's actually played out is the insurance cover, which was done on normal commercial basis, never envisaged the level of costs involved in remediating the fire, and in particular remediating the steel. And the cost of that has been hundreds of millions of dollars more than what the original steel that went in there.
The building is expected to be finished by the end of next year. And 4 teenagers who were in a central Wellington building before it burned down have now been found. The fire broke out last Sunday in the vacant Two Myths building in Gusney Street. The police were previously appealing for information on the 4 youths aged 13 and 14. They say all 4 will now be referred to youth services for unlawfully being in the building. One has also been referred for setting fire to items that subsequently caused it to catch fire. Demolition of the building began earlier this week. That's the news.
This week on Music 101, Fat Freddy's Drop co-host with me in studio to launch their brand new documentary series, Marauders. Alison Mosshart of The Kills talks about her relationship with God and the band's new album. And Matthew Hyde, lead singer from Beast Wars, shares his love for cover songs and picks his favourite music on the mixtape. Music 101 with me, Charlotte Ryan, this Saturday from 1pm here on RNZ National.
You are back with Checkpoint and Lisa Owen next. Right now, the updated short forecast from Met Service to midnight Saturday. Northland, Auckland, Coromandel Peninsula. A few spots of rain clearing to fine this evening. Isolated showers for eastern Coromandel and Northland tomorrow, turning to rain in the far north from the evening. Fine weather is forecast for Waikato, Waitomo, Taumarunui, Taupo and Bay of Plenty. Taranaki and from Taihape to Wellington, mainly fine. The chance of a shower until tonight. Gisborne, Hawke's Bay and Wairarapa. Showers south of Wairoa this evening, then north of Wairoa tomorrow morning. Otherwise mainly fine. For Westland, Bulla, Nelson and Marlborough. Isolated showers clearing this evening, then fine. Canterbury, fine weather. Otago, Southland and Fiordland, showers, possibly heavy with hail with snow to 200 to 300 metres, easing this evening. Showers retreating to Southland and the Fiordland coast tomorrow morning, then clearing later. And for Rekohu, Chatham Islands, showers. It is 7 minutes past 6. I'll have news headlines for you at 6:30.
Kia ora rā e ho, nau mai, hoki mai, this is Checkpoint, ko Lisa Owen tēnei. A sexual abuse support service wants compulsory consent education for first-year university students as data reveals the extent of complaints at our universities. There were more than 300 sexual violence incidents reported to universities across the country over the last 5 years. The Help Foundation says the figures also show our tertiary institutions need a universal process to report sexual violence that protects survivors. Louise Tanuth reports.
Nationally, there were 333 sexual violence incidents, both on and off campus, reported to universities between 2018 and 2023. That number is heavily skewed by the University of Otago, which reported 173. This 50-year student says she's not surprised.
There's a lot of stuff that happens at Otago, like for example the flat initiations. Yeah, a lot of like drinking and drug use, and honestly think it's the culture and that it's just like enabling people to do things because like it's acceptable. Yeah, I don't think enough is being done. They've got posters and stuff about sexual violence and that around campus. But yeah, it would be good to see like a proper review being done as to like why this kind of behaviour happens and in what settings.
Another student says the increase could be a sign students feel comfortable to come forward.
I wonder if it's an increase in confidence in the support systems and being able to step up and share what happened, or if it's an increase in the actual activity. A couple friends one night were walking home and there was some guy following them, probably nothing, but they got a little worried and ran into some random building. Campus Watch came into the building because they saw the whole thing happen and asked if they were okay, asked if they needed walks home, and that was pretty cool. They felt really good about that.
Massey University reported 62 cases from 2018 to 2023, over half of them being from this year alone. Victoria University reported 54 cases, while Auckland University of Technology, Lincoln and Waikato all reported less than 20 cases. The University of Auckland did not provide data. But Help clinical psychologist Catherine McPhillips says those figures are likely just a fraction.
We have a fairly good idea at the rates that are going on, and they're way higher than this. Universities have high rates. There's been surveys showing, as high as 1 in 5 females having experienced unwanted sexual activity.
As such, a high number of reported cases doesn't necessarily reflect badly on a particular university, and low reporting rates could point to a lack of trust in the system.
Things like expecting that they'll be blamed or not believed, that the process will just take so much of them, or that they'll be, traumatised by being asked these questions. Often it's about not seeing a safe way forward.
There is currently no standardised reporting process for sexual violence at universities. The Ministry of Education was meant to begin working on one with Universities New Zealand back in 2019, but that was put on hold due to the pandemic. Work resumed again at the start of this year, but there's been criticism that students haven't been consulted as part of the work. Kate Sharlikin is from Thursdays in Black, a national student group aimed at preventing and responding to sexual violence in tertiary spaces.
The lived experience that students have is just invaluable, and to essentially say and dismiss that essentially by not involving students in that conversation is really disappointing, because nobody's going to know as well as students are.
She says there are different processes across the board, especially when halls within the same university have different managers.
What we end up with is that inconsistency of how things are being dealt between halls, and it did create situations where someone who had caused harm in one hall was able to just go to a different hall.
Since 2019, Thursdays in Black has been calling for compulsory consent education to be rolled out to first-year tertiary students.
It's being asked for by so many people. We have a right to be safe.
The Ministry of Education says its code of practice sets expectations for universities, and staff must be provided with ongoing training and resources for physical and sexual violence prevention and response. In a statement, the University of Otago says it's committed to creating an environment where no form of sexual misconduct is tolerated. It's progressed a number of initiatives in support of this, and is likely a key factor in a high level of disclosures.
Louise Tanuth reporting there. With Israel delaying its Gaza ground offensive in an effort to secure the release of more hostages, the tiny Gulf state of Qatar has become a crucial player in negotiations. Qatar is the wealthy Arab country near Dubai that hosted the Men's Football World Cup last year. But it's also the starting point for global hostage deals with groups some governments in the West regard as terrorists. Hamas, which is still holding more than 200 hostages in Gaza, has an office in the capital, Doha. The ABC's Nicole Johnston reports.
An extraordinary moment. 85-year-old Israeli grandmother Yocheved Lifshitz is freed from Hamas. She says shalom, the Hebrew word for peace, twice, and shakes her captor's hand. She later says she'd been through hell. And the key negotiator behind this hostage deal is the gas-rich country Qatar. Sanam Vakul is the director of the Middle East program at the International Affairs Institute, Chatham House in London.
Qatar is playing an important mediation role. They have a long-standing relationship with Hamas that dates back for many years. They've always intervened in times of conflict between Israel and Hamas, using their financial resources to bring down the temperature in crises. And here they are using their influence to try and secure the release of hostages.
In the West, Hamas is defined as a terrorist group, but Qatar sees it differently. The political wing of the group has an office there, and senior Hamas leaders like Khaled Mashal live in the country. This is Mashal speaking to British Sky News.
Let them stop this aggression, and you will find the mediators like Qatar and some Arab countries like Egypt and others. They will find a way to have them released, and we'll send them to their homes.
Amir Maimoun is the Israeli ambassador to Australia, and he was asked about Qatar at this week's National Press Club address.
The role of Qatar, you've got 222 hostages still captive. How do you characterise the role of the Qatar, I think it's the government or whoever it is? Do you see them as honest brokers?
I'm sorry I can't answer your question, as I really don't know. What I know is that there are quite a number of players that are trying their utmost in order to bring about the release of the 222 children, babies, elderly that were abducted.
For Qatar, being an ambitious player means walking a foreign policy tightrope. On one hand, it hosts Hamas. On the other, it's home to the largest US military base in the region. But the West knows, if you need a deal done, go to Qatar. It keeps open communication lines with groups like Hamas, the Taliban and Jabhat al-Nusra, the Syrian branch of al-Qaeda. Sanam Vakil from Chatham House again.
Qatar has also tried to help secure the release of hostages in Russia, in the Ukraine war. It has also been mediating with the Taliban as well. You know, Qatar is playing perhaps a delicate balance between the West and the United States, which is, again, its primary ally, but at the same time sees itself as an important mediator. I would add that it has also helped secure the release of American hostages also held in the Islamic Republic of Iran.
Qatar is rich, but tiny and insecure. It's in the middle of a dangerous and complicated region. And with a back channel to Hamas, in the middle of this war, Qatar has the world's attention.
Israel's carried out what it's calling a targeted raid into Gaza using tanks. The Prime Minister says troops are still preparing for the ground offensive. The ABC's Middle East correspondent Alison Horn is in Ashdod in southern Israel.
There's been a small ground incursion into the northern parts of Gaza. So what it looks like physically is a number of armoured vehicles that have crossed over the fortified border into Gaza, so through the fence. And the military says that those tanks and infantry struck a number of terrorist cells, infrastructure and anti-tank missile launch posts. And it's certainly the biggest ground incursion into the north area of Gaza in this current war. And I think what it really signifies is that Israel is laying the groundwork for what will be a bigger ground offensive there, because when they go in from this vision that we've seen, they're taking their bulldozers and clearing parts of the land in northern Gaza, and a lot of that area does have farmland. So these big dozers are making roads and making space for their big machinery and their big armoured vehicles to get in there. But it's also to allow the military to gather intelligence and information about the layout of the land and what they may encounter there whenever they do launch this wider ground offensive.
17 minutes after 6 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. As the countdown begins for the biggest rugby match of the year, the All Blacks rivals, the Springboks, are looking back to a semi-final where they nearly lost a key player. England, who lost to South Africa in the match, are accusing rugby's world governing body of failing to give Tom Curry a fair hearing for his allegation of on-field racial slurs. The BBC's Joe Linsky reports.
It's World Cup final week in rugby union, but through all the build-up, two teams still look back. Saturday's semi-final sent South Africa through, but it then brought allegations. England's Tom Curry said he was abused on the field by Bongi Mbonambi. If that claim was upheld, he may have missed the final, but for now, there's resolution. In a statement, World Rugby said, having considered match footage and audio, the governing body's determined there is insufficient evidence at this time to proceed with the charges. The matter is deemed closed until additional evidence comes to light. That was met by this response from England. The RFU said they were deeply disappointed by that decision, and Curry should have been heard by an independent panel.
The RFU's expressed great disappointment at World Rugby's decision. That disappointment is shared by Tom, his teammates, the management team. Everybody associated with this team shares that bitter disappointment at World Rugby's decision. Tom Curry's done nothing wrong. Let's be clear on that. So we've got a victim of a situation who's not been able to have his voice heard.
World Rugby accepted Curry made the claim in good faith. He has since been abused on social media. South Africa too have made their stance clear in a statement. They said Bongi Mbonambi is an experienced, respected and decorated test player, and he's denied the allegations. They have absolute faith in his honesty and integrity.
For
Tom to be going through what he's going through, we as players, we know, because we all experience it somewhere along in our careers, and all I could do was just show support towards him. Things like this are not good for anybody to deal with, So, yeah, we've just tried to focus on the rugby and be supportive towards Tom.
To call out stuff like that isn't easy, and as he's seen this week, when you do something courageous like that, you put yourself out there, and he's been absolutely fantastic in that regard.
Is there any process by which you can take this further or make more representations of World Rugby?
For our point, we'll leave that where the RFU's come pretty categorical with their statement today. As far as we're concerned, we've got a game tomorrow night. We're getting on with that.
This is not the way this sport wants to count down to its showpiece, and more twists may lie ahead. Curry will start for England in their third-place playoff. His team want to use it to launch a new era. This has been the World Cup where they've defied expectations. They now want to end it, looking forward.
British Prime Minister Rishi Sunak has sounded a loud warning over the risks of artificial intelligence, saying humanity could lose control of AI completely if the technology is not properly controlled. He's announced what he's calling the world's first AI Safety Institute ahead of a global conference, but regulation, he believes, is not on the cards. The ABC's Angus Randall reports.
If we lose control of the machines could one day control us, even destroy us. British Prime Minister Rishi Sunak is worried what the next stage of artificial intelligence could bring.
Get this wrong, and AI could make it easier to build chemical or biological weapons. Terrorist groups could use AI to spread fear and destruction on an even greater scale. Criminals could exploit AI for cyber attacks, disinformation, fraud, or even child sexual abuse. And in the most unlikely but extreme cases, there is even the risk that humanity could lose control of AI completely.
The Prime Minister has even likened the threat posed by AI to that of pandemic and nuclear war. It all sounds pretty alarming, but the British leader won't be trying to control AI through new laws.
The UK's answer is not to rush to regulate. This is a point of principle. We believe in innovation. It's a hallmark of the British economy. So we will always have a presumption to encourage it, not to stifle it. And in any case, how can we write laws that make sense for something that we don't yet fully understand?
That puts him at odds with the European Union, which is in the final stages of creating AI regulation. The UK is instead setting up what the Prime Minister says is the world's first artificial intelligence safety institute. And next week, he'll be welcoming AI companies, political leaders and experts to an AI safety summit at Bletchley Park, northwest of London. Rishi Sunak says everyone is invited.
Yes, we've invited China. Now, I know there are some who will say that they should have been excluded, but there can be no serious strategy for AI without at least trying to engage all of the world's leading AI powers.
Dr. Simon McCullum is from the Victoria University of Wellington. He's been studying AI for more than 25 years.
The challenge is that things are happening so quickly that even a very, very good safety institute is not likely to be able to keep up. It's the right kind of idea, but unfortunately, given the state of AI development, I don't think it's going to change much. The best option you have is to regulate on some principles to try it rather than regulate details, because the details change too quickly.
Toby Walsh is the chief scientist at UNSW's AI Institute. He's keeping a close eye on what's happening in the UK.
Like many in the AI community, I have a mixed reaction. There are some things that he talks about, some risks and opportunities that I really concur with. Others that I'm somewhat more sceptical. The idea that we might be building Terminator robots that are going to be impossible to switch off, I think that's a bit fantastical. But the more pressing immediate risks that he mentioned, the risks on people's work, the misinformation that we're already starting to see happening, those very real, very pressing things that we should be doing about yesterday.
Some exciting news for fans of the Fab Four. Earlier this year, Paul McCartney revealed that he'd been using AI to create what he called the final Beatles song, based on a 1970s demo by John Lennon. The track, called Now and Then, is set to be released next week. The BBC's Mark Savage has the details.
1, 2, 3, 4.
The Beatles have come together for one last time. Next week, the band will release what they are calling their last song.
Lend me your ears and I'll sing
The new single, Now and Then, started life as a home recording by John Lennon in the 1970s, but it was only finished last year. Paul McCartney, Ringo Starr and Lennon's son Sean announced the track in a short trailer this afternoon.
When we lost John, we knew that it was really over.
Paul called me up and said he'd like to work on Now and Then. He put the bass on, I put the drums on.
It's the last song that my dad and Paul and George and Ringo will get to make together.
Now and Then originated on the same cassette that produced this new Beatles song in 1995. But the audio was considered too damaged to be of use. Until now. New computer software, trained on Lennon's voice, allowed the remaining Beatles to extract and refine his vocals. The new recording also includes a guitar part that George Harrison played before his death in 2001.
We'll never disappear.
It's been a long and winding road to get to this point, but Now and Then will premiere on BBC Six Music and all around the world next Thursday.
Lead me to
Are you one of the 80 million people who bought a copy of the Da Vinci Code? Published in 2003, the conspiracy theory thriller by Dan Brown became a global bestseller. But that meant the book also ended up in a lot of second-hand shops. Now, the British artist David Shrigley has stripped the shelves, collecting thousands of copies, which he's pulped for his latest project, creating new versions of George Orwell's novel 1984. The BBC's Alice Adderley has been finding out more.
The Da Vinci Code by Dan Brown is a detective thriller novel which explored an alternative version of religious history. It provoked a popular interest in speculation concerning the Holy Grail legend and Mary Magdalene's role in the history of Christianity. The novel, which was denounced by Christian denominations and criticised for historic and scientific inaccuracies, nevertheless went on to be a worldwide bestseller and has been translated into more than 40 languages. A film version was released in 2006, starring Tom Hanks and Audrey Tautou.
Dear God. A murder that hides a message. He did this himself in his own blood?
Is it possible?
A code. This is a message. Your grandfather left you.
He left us.
Only he can break.
But by 2017, the book had fallen out of vogue, and a charity shop in Swansea in Wales put a sign in the window asking for no more editions of the Dan Brown novel to be donated. They had acquired so many copies of the novel that they could no longer sell them. This sparked the interest of the artist David Shrigley, who set about collecting copies of the book.
Whenever you get any materials, whatever it is, whether it's paper or sculpture materials, you want to make something with it. We're sort of primed to think that books shouldn't be thrown away. The Da Vinci Code is a sort of holiday book. It's a page turner that we'll read on the beach. But nonetheless, it means a lot to a lot of people. And it's that reluctance to throw books away means it gives, like the Oxfam books and other charity bookshops, a bit of a problem.
He's now pulped 6,000 editions of the Da Vinci Code and turned them into a set of copies of George Orwell's 1984, which warns of the dangers of authoritarianism. He says the reason he chose this book is that it still resonates today, but also that 70 years after Orwell's death, it's now out of copyright. The first 250 editions will be on sale in Swansea this weekend, priced at the perhaps surreal sum of $600.
Well, on the interesting subject of instant coffee, you've been in touch with some suggestions. This person says, I've worked out the perfect way of making instant coffee palatable. Stand by for the recipe. Equal amount of milk and oat milk. I fill the cup. Heat for 70 seconds in the wave. Whisk in 1 heaped teaspoon of coffee and add 1.5 teaspoons of sugar or not. Voila, and it's yum. We've decided that's too much of an investment in our time. Andrew has got in touch and says the checkpoint drink recipe perfectly described the contraption that he's been drinking for 44 years. Andrew suggests we try it with baking cocoa and honey. Yum, he reckons. Not convinced, Andrew. May try it. We'll let you know the outcome if I'm not off with some kind of gastro disorder as a consequence. Have a wonderful weekend and thank you for joining us.
RNZ News headlines at 6:30. Good evening, I'm Evie Ashton. The Christchurch Terror attack inquest has heard that a police call taker gave information on the terrorists' manifesto a priority 2 classification. A police dispatcher said she was only focused on events assigned the highest priority that day. Police and Customs say they've seized cocaine worth $63 million from a container at the Port of Auckland. The 140 kilograms originated in Ecuador and 4 people are facing charges. The European Union's calling for pauses in the fighting in Gaza so aid can be delivered. And the cost of Christchurch's Parakiore Recreation and Sports Centre has blown out from the original $220 million to $700 million. Work started in 2018 and the completion date is now in 2025. Those are the headlines. Our next news and weather is at 7.
This week on Sunday Night Retro.
My little girls love to sing and they all think that they're superstars. How about we write a show around that concept and that's how it was born.
Megan Alatini talks about True Bliss and the reality show that made them famous. Who'd guess there's a massive colony of seabirds nesting in the snowy peaks above Kaikoura? Jeff Harrow stumbled across them and he'll tell us all about it. And Dalvanius Maui Prime talks to Chris Burke about his life in music. Sunday Night Retro on RNZ National.
You're with me, Evie Ashton, listening to Trending Now through till 7 o'clock. We begin this evening with Focus on Politics.
Support for Labour collapsed on election night, banishing the party to the opposition benches.
A little bit depressed. Yeah. Very depressed.
Very disappointed.
Labour is now examining what went so wrong and pondering who is best to lead them through the political wilderness.
I've still got a bit of fight left in me.
Kia ora, ko Katie Scotcher aho, ane te purongo tōrangapū mō tēnei wiki. Welcome to Focus on Politics. It's been almost 2 weeks since Labour's election drubbing, and the party is still coming to terms with its dismal result. Support for Labour plummeted from 50% in 2020 to just under 27%. Labour lost its grip on almost 30 electorates, including party strongholds Mount Roskill, New Lynn and West Coast Tasman. The preliminary result has left Labour with a diminished caucus, a team of more than 60 reduced to just 34.
We're picking ourselves up again. It's been a pretty brutal weekend.
A little bit sad, a bit reflective.
You must be gutted to have lost Wairarapa.
I am. Yeah, that job meant a lot to me.
While emotions for many in the party are still raw, Labour must quickly turn its attention to dissecting its loss. Such reflection will inevitably present questions about leadership. Labour leader Chris Hipkins remains in the job, for now at least.
I didn't want to create a huge void, and also I want to take some time to reflect, and I want to take some time to reflect with the team on what the best way is forward for the Labour Party.
Labour MPs publicly backed Chris Hipkins as they entered their first post-election caucus meeting.
I think he's got the goods, be it as Prime Minister or Leader of the Opposition, and if someone's good at something, regardless of what's happened,